Hello, boys and girls. Welcome back to my channel. I talk about everything to do with the Kibbutzim, and particularly since the 7th of October, I talk about the ongoing war with Hamas in Gaza. And this war with Hamas is the longest war that we have experienced since 1948, the Israeli War of Independence, which the Palestinians call the Nakba, the disaster. And here today on the, what day is it? It's the 14th of December here, but in Vancouver, Canada, it's the 13th of December, I think. And I'm
Yeah.
talking to a former volunteer, Brett Price. So, good morning, Brett. How are you?
Boker Tov, I'm good.
Boker Tov, look at that. He talks Hebrew. My goodness.
A little. That's about
Okay, but
20% of
we'll
my
continue
Hebrew.
the conversation in English. Now, Brett is a non-Jewish former volunteer in three kibbutzim, which were Ein Gev, Ein Gedi, and Be'eri. He was there in Israel working as a foreign volunteer in 1990 and 1991. Now, what I will do, I will talk with Brett about his experiences as a volunteer then. It's very interesting when he was here, 1990, 1991. That was when we had the war with Saddam Hussein in Iraq. And he then sent over 37 heavy Scud missiles to Israel, and Israel didn't respond. We kept out of this war while Tony Blair, as Prime Minister of England, and President Bush of America told us, look, don't worry, we'll deal with these boys by ourselves. Anyway, and also, what is also very significant here is the date that Brett first contacted me via email after he viewed or subscribed to the channel. It was the 5th of November, which in England is commemorated as Bonfire Night from, I think, the middle 1600s, when a bloke called Guy Fawkes tried to blow up the Houses of Parliament, but he didn't get that far. So between the war with Saddam Hussein, between the 1600s and Guy Fawkes, and here we are now on the whatever date it is, the 14th of November here in Israel. We are talking about the war. So go into it, Brett, without all of my blah blah blah. Tell me uh, your experiences in Engev on the Sea of Galilee. Your volunteering also in En Gedi on the sea, on the Dead Sea, and Be'eri, which is a lesser known kibbutz. That is until the 7th of October this year. How did you react to the absolute massacre and disaster at kibbutz Be'eri?
Well, on the 7th, I didn't know what had happened to Berry. We're still finding uh, out the facts. Even when I woke up 10 hours later after the initial attack, um, uh, the status of the various kibbutzes was unknown, kind of thing, at least what was filtering up into Canada. It wasn't until a couple of days that I was able to confirm that Barrie was literally devastated. They lost 10% of their population. And it it hit me pretty hard because I knew people there. I shared laughter, food. I worked with some of these people, kind of thing. And to know that they lost 10% of their population hit home. This was a place that I had walked. I had slept there. I had lived there for uh, many months, and then they were a victim of this heinous crime.
So as time went on, after the first attack on that first day, and you discovered the details of what happened, what was your reaction? Not only what was your reaction, but you are half a world away from me. And how did the people in Vancouver, Canada, how did they react to what was going
Well, in the first few days, a lot of people didn't even know,
on? Mhm.
kind of thing. You hear about attacks in the Middle East or um, details. People don't really pay attention, and they didn't realize just exactly how devastating this attack is. I mean, some people don't even realize that we're talking about like a regimental size army rushing into Israel and looting, pillaging, raping, whatever they could do. Um, it doesn't quite sink in just how big an incursion this was. Um, I think the worst part was not so much Vancouver's reaction as the social media reaction, because I remember that morning reading social media comments. This was before the IDF could even mount a proper response, and people were blaming the Jews, the Israelis.
Already,
Already,
whatever we do,
there
Jews
was
are on
like,
the news, and people automatically, straight away, say, "Oh,
yeah, that was the most shocking thing to me. Just like because there was no bombing of Gaza yet, there was no retaliation. There was just the IDF trying to desperately get a handle of the situation within the first 12 hours.
mhm.
And already I could see posts of people in Europe, um, in America, the East Coast of America, 3 hours before me, already saying, oh, well, it's, the Jews' fault, it's Israel's fault, kind of thing. And I can't understand how anybody can view the killing of children as, the response. Like, give that response, like, oh, it's the children's fault. Or, if they're guilty because their parents are guilty. I can't understand, like, killing elderly people, kind of thing. It makes no sense to me. They're not a danger, kind of thing. But if your goal is to kill the Jews, then it doesn't matter who you are,
Well,
kind of
I'll
thing.
just stop you for a moment. I'm looking at my cell phone here, and I'm looking at our first correspondence. You wrote to me on the 5th of November. If you had told me on September the 1st, 2023, that in less than 2 months' time, I would see a member of the SS being given
Oh,
a standing ovation twice for being a member of the SS in my parliament, I'd have called you mad. Then to see the horror of October the 7th and realize that Be'eri was hit, but it hurt my soul. But I could never have predicted before the IDF even was able to respond. People were blaming the murdered women and children. As a non Jewish Canadian, I feel deep shame.
yeah.
Wow.
I One of the things that I've tried to do as an adult is when I look in the mirror every morning, I want to respect or like the person who's looking back at me. And anytime I've ever felt shame looking at that picture, it's always been something that I've done or failed to do. And it's very, very weird to look in that mirror, see myself reflected like who I am, but feel shame for the people in my community.
Mhm.
Um, finding excuses for anti-Semitism, finding you know the most feeble reasons to um, attack Jewish people.
Mhm.
Um, like, okay, let's just say, I don't believe this, but let's just say that you're anti-Zionist and not an anti-Semitic person. Why are you targeting a synagogue or an Israeli or a Jewish person outside of Israel? Like, if you really are an anti-Zionist kind of thing and not anti-Jewish, wouldn't you want to make the Jewish person's life the best it could possibly be outside of Israel? Wouldn't any Israeli that immigrated out of Israel, wouldn't that be the best option for you if you're an anti-Zionist kind of thing? Because they're not in Israel, right? But they don't. They lash out because anti-Zionism is just an excuse to hate Jews kind of thing. It's the
Well, I
ever-changing.
appreciate what you're saying because as a non-Jew, it's true. You have the experience of working in the kibbutzim, and I see in the background behind you, I see a Chanukiah, a menorah, with the at your end the seventh day of the Hanukkah festival, the Festival of Lights. And it's very, very heartwarming for me to see you supporting us here, both in Israel and Jews in Canada. And you also told me that a few weeks ago you attended a Crystal Nach commemoration ceremony
Yeah.
in Vancouver that commemorated the Night of Broken Glass in the late 1930s, before the war, the Second World War started. So, you see, for me, having grown up as a Jew in England, very true that I went to a Jewish school from the age of 5 to 18. So I was, in a way, shielded from the rest of the society and the community in Liverpool in one sense. I myself never, ever felt any anti Semitism growing up in England. And suddenly, this shockwave, this reaction
Oh,
throughout the world of anti Zionism becoming anti Semitism, it has really deeply hurt me and moved me. And, here in Israel, I have a whole conglomeration of friends around Israel. And we just got the feeling that the whole world is against us. And yet suddenly I'm contacting you in Vancouver. And for me, it's very, very heartwarming to see that the whole world is not against us and that people are standing with us. So, how, how do you feel about the situation now? Uh, has there been any manifestation of anti Semitism in Vancouver?
yeah. There's been a lot of pro-Palestinian marches. I'm a volunteer for the Bring Them Home chapter in Vancouver for the hostages, and I'm an active member kind of thing. Like I put up posters. I've seen those ripped down.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah. It's sort of like even if you're the thing that gets me is that if you're pro-Palestinian, asking for the return of the hostage is not a mutually exclusive stance. It's like any normal person would say, these are not combat personnel. This is a crime. Let's bring them home, you know. But again, I don't think the norms exist with a lot of people. If the because they're anti-Semitic. So if it's a reason to hate the Jews, if it's a reason to bend the norms of warfare, they make an exception,
I
kind of
see.
thing.
Tell me, before October the 7th, did you ever see in Vancouver any occurrences or manifestations of anti-Semitism?
No, I mean you might hear once every 5 years someone would say something about like the Jews control media or something, like one of those bizarre conspiracy
Yeah.
theories. But most people would just sort of look, what the hell are you talking about? Right? Like nobody would sort of like brook that kind of talk, at least not in public, right? What crazy people do in the privacy of your own home, I don't know, but it wasn't a public thing at all.
So you're saying that anti-Semites were, and maybe you didn't hear about them, local anti-Semites. Who do you reckon is initiating these protest movements? Is there a substantial immigrant Muslim population in Vancouver?
No, it's very small. I believe it's about, I think the demographics for Vancouver, I think it's about 2% of the population. So it's very, very small. Um, maybe it's twice,
Mm-hmm.
twice the Jewish population,
Mm-hmm.
kind of thing, but it's not, it doesn't make up um,
I
a
see. And
significant.
how many people or how many times did you become aware of these demonstrations with all the different slogans of from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free, and things like this? How many people actually took part? Any idea?
I That I don't know. I know that they're usually larger than the Jewish uh, protests, like the Bring Them Home is primarily Jewish people. There are some Indian people who are showing up who aren't Jews. They're
Yeah.
Hindu supporting Israel. Uh, there's significant members of the Iranian community that are in support of Israel. Again, they are non-Jewish people. Uh, but for the most part, the people who are going out in support of the um, uh, hostages are is the Jewish community.
I see.
But it seems to be coming from our um, universities and our
That's what
colleges.
I understand too.
Yeah,
Yeah, I found out with all of my different viewings on YouTube that Qatar has really penetrated North American universities by funding many of the universities. Yeah. Now, let me ask you something. So, when Israel decided to respond and go into Gaza after a week or two, or no matter how long it was, I can't remember.
it's almost a
Once
month.
Israel went in boots on the ground, what then was the second stage of the reaction?
Okay, so the second stage actually started uh, for the people's reaction before the IDF entered Gaza on the boots on the ground. It started with the bombing, and people had no sort of critical thinking involved with it. They took Hamas numbers as 100% accurate, kind of thing. It's like, their strategy is to show civilian casualties, and yet you take their numbers as no inflation. And I remember an incident where I think it was Islamic Jihad had launched a rocket that had failed, and it landed in the parking lot of a hospital. And
Yes.
the very first results were Israel bombs a hospital and there's 500 dead. And this was filmed live on Al Jazeera by accident. There was and you saw the
I
explosion
remember
kind of thing,
Sophia
and you saw the rocket. Yeah. And I, there was um, a press release that 500 civilians were killed when the Israelis hit the hospital. It turned out, and this was done faster than you could count 500 people, right? Like, in terms of an emergency response, right? So they just chose a number kind of thing. And it turned out the hospital wasn't hit, the parking lot was. Um, there were only about 50 casualties, not even like dead, but just 50 injured and dead combined.
So the
And it wasn't an
knee-jerk
Israeli attack.
reaction, the knee-jerk reaction was straight away to accuse Israel without any investigation or checking the facts and the statistics.
Yeah, and I mean that's Hamas's playbook, right? There's an attack, give out a number of the dead, kind of thing, and the Western media just accepts it. And it's like, and they'll use an excuse like, oh, we're getting this from the Ministry of Health in Gaza. And it's like, Hamas is the government in Gaza. So Hamas, which is a recognized terrorist group, kind of thing, at least in most Western nations, excuse me, and people are just accepting whatever they say as true. There's no sort of critical thinking. There's no investigation, as you said. There's no digging deeper. It's, well, if we want access to Gaza, right, we can't sort of report against them. So there's no criticism of Hamas at all. So the reporters get in.
All right, so it's now day 69 of the war on the 14th of December here. And the forecast is this war, at least in a big way on the ground, is going to go on for at least another month, maybe another 2 months, who knows? And what will be in the future, nobody knows. There are various estimates and guesses. So, okay, I'm going to end the interview here now. Generally speaking, today, let me ask you the last question. What is the feeling, your feeling, or the feeling in Vancouver about the way the war is progressing?
Uh, it depends on who you ask. Um, if you ask people who are pro-Palestinian, um, the war is terrible. And I mean, I've heard people say that Israel is indiscriminately bombing Gaza. And someone used the statistics that there was more bombs dropped in Gaza than a year in World War II. I believe was by the Allies. And I went, you don't even understand the facts that you're quoting. That proves it's not indiscriminate because if it was indiscriminate bombing and there were more bombs dropped, the casualty figures would be worse than World War II because these are precision bombs. So if they wanted to target as many people as they could, the result would be absolutely, you know, statistically far worse than anything in World War II. Um, but they're not thinking, kind of thing.
They're reacting.
If you ask, yeah, and uh, they're saying things that support their position, right? It's I'm going to say Israel is being indiscriminate because it supports my position of being pro-Palestinian, kind of thing. And they'll use shocking statistics like more bombs dropped, by Israel. I don't even know if that's true. It's what I've heard people say, kind of
Well,
thing. But I'm
there
just
are
like,
so many facts and a lot of information going around, and the person who doesn't really know what the situation is, or even you know what the situation is, but you're remote from it and distant. I mean, it's very confusing when you hear both sides of the argument.
I, uh, I think the other side is the Jewish population, which I have like before October 7th, I didn't know any Jewish people socially, like at all. That
You
my
only knew Jews in
significant po
Kibbutzim in Israel.
yes, like literally, that is my Jewish experience, like
Yeah.
kind of thing where Israelis. Now, I'm sure in business, when you're working and stuff like that, that I ran into more than one Jew in my life. But religion's religion's never been important to me, so I never picked up on any clues that someone would be Jewish, kind of thing. And then that would only work if they were, you know, religiously Jewish, as opposed to like just
So
a member of the
visibly, when you
community.
saw them with a kippah and maybe with a beard, or yeah,
Well, even then, I never would see that at work,
I see.
kind of thing. At least, so I never, when it came to my social interactions, I never knew any Jews except on my trip to Israel. But I reached out to the Jewish community because of the anti-Semitism, because I couldn't let it stand, right?
Yeah.
I couldn't do nothing. I didn't know what to do. But the Jewish people that I've met, like I've been going to synagogues, not because I'm religious, I'm an atheist, but it shows them that they're not alone, kind of thing, that I support the community. But they're hoping that Hamas gets destroyed,
Okay.
kind
Well,
of
Brett,
thing.
uh,
Um,
we are going to finish this first interview now. And I thank you from the bottom of my heart for your support for our cause here. And I will contact you again and we'll do the second part of this meeting in which you tell us about how your kibbutz experience in three kibbutzim, how it affected you, what you learned from it, and everything else. So thank you very much. And
you're welcome.
anybody who is watching here, viewing by chance or being subscribed, I'll put out an invitation to anybody else in the world who was a former volunteer or a visitor or a tourist to Israel who would like to talk with me about the current situation of the war against Hamas or about their kibbutz experience. Please contact me. My email is kibbutzivri@gmail.com. And hopefully, I will hear from more people. Brett, once again, thank you very much. And I'll see you next
Thank you
time.
for having me.